Hey there, pre-AP. Let's start on our Molecules of Life video. So part 1 is going to consist of carbohydrates and lipids, and then part 2 is going to consist of proteins and nucleic acids. So we're probably going to hopefully get through part 1 and part 2, but most likely we're going to have to split this up into 2 videos. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to talk about, and make sure you have a pen and a highlighter so that we can annotate your notes and we can draw some of these molecules tomorrow and maybe put some together. So one of the things that we have to remember is, go ahead, look at your outline with me. Macromolecules. Macro means large, molecules mean molecules. So right out beside there that these are large molecules. These are big guys. They're not little bitty. And these macromolecules, they are something called a polymer. Think about poly, like a polygon, many sides. These are formed, so these are big molecules, complex molecules. Please highlight that they are formed from individual units called monomers. We call those the building blocks, kind of like Legos. And how these polymers form is those monomers, please highlight, they're linked by covalent bonds. Make yourself a note out beside there. Covalent bonds, are they strong or are they weak? And because of those covalent bonds, think about it. Which one is it? Please tell me strong. Because they're strong, they help keep an organism together. You're held together by a bunch of covalent bonds. And then please highlight, this is another example of structure equals function. Remember, we've been studying carbon today. So we're going to see some of those carbon functional groups come back. So know that molecules, macromolecules, are formed by dehydration or condensation reaction. Which means, let's highlight that a hydroxyl group, remember that's an OH group, is removed from one molecule and a hydrogen is removed from another. And because of this forms water. So let's look at this picture right here. We have 2 molecules. We have short polymer here, and we have an unlinked monomer. Remember, monomers are little building blocks. We want to make a really long polymer, a big one. So what we'll do is we'll take the OH group from the small monomer and link it to the hydrogen of the shorter polymer. And what will happen is those 2 H's come together. There's 2 of them and an O. And what's H2O? Water. Water's going to leave. It's a byproduct. And because it leaves, it allows that monomer and that short polymer to become this big polymer down here. But let's look. This is called dehydration. Think about it. If you're dehydrated, make yourself this note for dehydration. Think about it. If you're dehydrated, you're thirsty. You are lacking water. That's what's happening here. That OH group, that hydroxyls, pairing up with that hydrogen, and you are getting rid of water. But let's look at hydrolysis down here. Remember, make yourself the note. Hydro means water. Lysis means to break. Ooh. Remember, every biology word that are big and scary, break them up into pieces. So we're going to break water here. What's going to happen is, see our little water molecule? He's going to come in here and he's going to break this bond between monomer 3 and monomer 4. Water's going to come in there and bust up the party. And he's going to say, It's going to take one hydrogen and add it to the longer piece. And then it's going to attach the other part of water, that other hydrogen that's left, pair it with that oxygen, and it'll create a hydroxyl group. So, hydrolysis or hydrolysis, you're breaking something with water. You are adding water to this, and you're breaking things up into two separate molecules. Dehydration, remember you're lacking water. Think about being dehydrated. You're taking water out. You're lacking water inside of you, so you're thirsty. This guy is breaking off that hydroxyl group and that hydrogen, and it is sending it out into the world as a byproduct of water, dehydration, and allowing this short polymer and this small monomer to become a very long polymer. So, dehydration, you're joining two things together. Hydrolysis, you're breaking up one large molecule and turning it into pieces. Alright, so let's get on to carbohydrates. So make sure within that big letter B and letter C that you highlight what dehydration is and what hydrolysis is. Let's move on to carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, please highlight that these refer to carbo, meaning carbon, and hydrate, meaning water. These are full of carbons and some things that could be taken out and broken down during dehydration and form a byproduct of water. So our first things we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. And these are just moving from simplest sugars to complex. So monosaccharides highlight that those are the building blocks. And please remember that sacchara means sugar. An example of a monosaccharide, just write this out to the side. This would be something like glucose. You need glucose. That's a cellular food. Let's look about disaccharides. Remember, what does the prefix di mean? What number? Very nice, too. That would mean you form a disaccharide whenever you highlight this. Two monosaccharides are linked together by a covalent bond. So, if we decided to take this monomer, you add glucose plus glucose, and that equals sucrose. Sucrose is table sugar. So that's two monomers, glucose and glucose, added together equals sucrose. And then polysaccharides, remember, poly meaning many. Highlight that it's a polymer. It's a whole bunch of sugars linked together. Something like this, an example would be something like starch. Think about what foods you find starch in. So if we look at our little diagram here, remember, carbohydrates are going to have functional groups of carbon. So think about where you have this C double bonded, that carbon double bonded to an oxygen. What could that possibly be? So then, of course, polymers again, those are complex sugars. Highlight that starch is in plants. If you want to make yourself some examples, that's going to be potatoes. Oop. I went back on accident, sorry. So, potatoes. And then glycogen, that is formed in and stored in animals. That's going to be a very complex sugar. Remember that carbohydrates, make yourself this note. This is quick energy. If you're a runner, you're going to load up on pasta, carbs the night before. Quick energy. So think about it. If quick energy, is it going to stick around with you very long? So, please make sure that you highlight for big letter B that this chemical composition always has a carbon double bonded with oxygen. And it has 2 times as many hydrogens also present. And the names always end in ose. And I gave you some examples. Fructose, glucose, sucrose. And these are primary energy sources for cells. These are quick energies. So know those carbohydrates down there below. Starch, remember that's in plants, like we said, potatoes. Glycogen, that's a really complex sugar for animal cells. It's stored in liver cells. And then cellulose, that's part of the cell wall. So if you want to put out beside cellulose right here, just to remind yourself, what's so great about cellulose? You know what's so awesome about cellulose? It makes, let's see, things like lettuce, cabbage, carrots. We could name endless things. Crunchy. This is what makes things crunchy. Be thankful for cellulose. Think about chewing on mushy lettuce. Just think about that. Lettuce, the consistency of pudding. That would be the grossest salad on the face of the earth. So thank you, cellulose, for making up that plant cell wall and making my cabbage crunchy in my coleslaw, and my carrots on my salad, and my lettuce in my salad. Not just croutons. Croutons are, they're not a green. And then our last one we'll talk about is cotton. Please make yourself some examples out there. This is in the exoskeleton of some animals and fungi cells. For us, that's relevant. This is in your so if you want to, this is in the exoskeleton, so just draw you a little bug. We won't name any bugs. I was going to make you name bugs, but just draw you a little bug. Exoskeleton means skeleton on the outside, so let's draw us a little bug. Make it an antenna. To remind you, cotton is in bugs. It makes bugs. Make yourself this note. It makes bugs crunchy. It does. It makes your bugs crunchy whenever you squish on them. If you step on a bug, it goes crunch. You just think, ooh, I just destroyed some cotton. And then the last thing in part 2 we'll talk about is lipids. Please highlight that these are the macromolecules, big molecules. There are fats, oils, waxes, and steroids. And most lipids are hydrophobic. Remember, those are water haters. And highlight that lipids are mainly composed of hydrocarbons. Ooh, hydrocarbons. Make an example out here. This is just a bunch of carbons linked together. And think about it. That means that all of these free bonds are going to be saturated or shoved and stuffed with hydrogens. Hydro means hydrogen, carbon means carbon. This means that this thing is covered up with hydrogens. Hydrocarbon. So here we go. This is the dehydration of to make a lipid. So if we look at this is glycerol, and it's going to turn into a triglyceride. If you've ever heard of someone going to the doctor and getting their cholesterol checked, they always check their triglycerides, how much fat is floating in their blood. So remember, dehydration means that we're taking out water. Remember, being dehydrated means that you are lacking water. So we take the OH group from this glycerol, just this. Let's erase that. We're going to take this hydrogen from this group. We're going to take the OH from this fatty acid, And once we combine that together, that OH and that hydrogen, it makes H2O. And because of that, these are going to form a bond. Ooh, right down here. And it turns into a triglyceride. So just showing you again, dehydration synthesis, combining two things together, a glycerol and a fatty acid, two lipids can make a really gigantic lipid, like a triglycerol. So saturated versus unsaturated. This is a really big question that I usually get. So here we go. Let's try this. Saturated fats. These are going to be solid at room temp. Unsaturated, they're going to be liquid at room temp. Saturated fats. Know that these have fatty acids that are saturated, or all that saturated means is that it is just very heavy with hydrogen. So if you want to put another arrow and put that this is to be saturated means that you are heavy. Think about it. If you've been outside and someone shoved you into a big old body of water and you come out, you're going to be dripping with water. You are saturated with water. Saturated is a fancy science term for heavy. You're going to be heavy with hydrogens. And we need to know that there are no open bonds. If you're saturated, you have no room to bond with anything else. That's why butter and margarine, they are really, really solid at room temperature. Even after you melt them in the microwave, you can leave butter out for a while at room temp, and it will go back to being a solid. It'll take a minute. So if we look at this molecule, remember all of these black molecules are carbon. All these little pearls are hydrogen. This thing is full of hydrogen. It is saturated. So remember, we said they're solid at room temp. Please highlight that they're usually associated with animals. This is the bad types of fat when it comes to your diet. I'm going to be the first to say, I love butter. Sometimes I got to put butter on my biscuit, and that's okay. But you just don't need to have a whole ton of it in your life every day. A little butter won't hurt you, but a whole bunch of butter over your lifetime can potentially hurt you. So let's go on to unsaturated fat. Please highlight that these have double or triple bonds that could be broken to add more hydrogen to the fatty acid. These are liquid at room temperature, and these usually come from plants. These are things like vegetable oil, sunflower oil, peanut oil. But then you always hear about these things called polyunsaturated fats. Ooh. All that means is, remember, poly means many. It means they have numerous or many double or triple bonds in the fatty acid portion. These are also liquids, and they're from plants. But then we get into something called hydrogenated and trans fats. Please write out beside that those are bad. These are terrible for you, because scientists have actually made these. And whenever we go messing with nature, sometimes not so great desired results happen. So know that these are oils. These are originally unsaturated. They're liquid. But what happens is they add hydrogen. They shove hydrogen into those unsaturated liquids, and they break those double or triple bonds. They turn that really nice, pretty healthy unsaturated fat into a saturated fat. That's not good. Phospholipids. Please know that these molecules replace a single fatty acid with a single phosphate ion. And if you want to, let's move on to our phospholipid slide. Ooh, remember? We drew him before. Draw your phospholipid out there. Label which is hydrophilic and which is phobic. Remember, this is philic. This is phobic. This is phobic because it has a fatty acid tail. Ooh. And it's got a phosphate right here in the middle, which is right here. And he's hydrophilic. He likes water. These fatty acid tails, they're saturated with carbon. They're hydrophobic. They hate water. And then remember, if we flip over to the back, please. No, the big thing about these is that in little letter B, it has 2 fatty acid tails. We just drew those. So those little bitty tails waving at you. And you just need to know that this is little letter C. This forms the phospholipid bilayer. Out beside phospholipid bilayer, put the word cell membrane, just to remind yourself. Waxes, ooh boy. Your big example is going to be something like lipstick. Ladies, all your lipstick is some type of alcohol plus an oil. That's why your lipstick glides on and doesn't sit on your lips like a piece of chalk. That would be really gross. They also put waxes or oils in there so that your lips won't dry out while you wear it. So know that this is combining an alcohol with an unsaturated fat. And then know that this is lipstick. Look at those cute little shades. I think I like that one the best. I don't know. I kind of like that one. I'm between those two. You can choose which one you like. And then steroids. We've already kind of talked about steroids before, about how if you abuse steroids, they can mess up the communication between cells. So please know and highlight that a steroid is a 4-carbon ring with a top ring located or looking like a house. So if you would, this is what it's talking about. This ring structure right here. Carbon loves to form rings. And then this is the house that it's connected to. You do not have to draw this. So please know that cholesterol, highlight that cholesterol is a steroid molecule. And we like cholesterol somewhat because it helps our membranes be very flexy. But also highlight that last sentence where it says cholesterol in excess. This is, you eat way too much butter. I love butter, but I know I can't have too much of it because it can make my cholesterol go into an excess amount, and it can be bad for our health. And please know, the last thing, lipids are stored in animal tissue. That's things, put you an example out there. These are things like bacon. Bacon's going to be your big one. Bacon. And we want to talk about this because if you eat too much adipose tissue, not all of it's going to be flushed out of your body. Your body's going to actually store it. Because we have this mechanism inside of us that says, ooh, I need to store some fat and put it back and form adipose tissue, fat tissue inside our bodies. Just in case we go through a period of time where we don't have a lot of food. And that way your body can say, well, I stored some food, some fat, and I put it back for a rainy day, for whenever we have some type of food shortage. And instead of letting the body start eating muscle and breaking down things that we don't need to, we're going to go ahead and break down that excess fat tissue first and try to save ourselves from starving to death. So, if we have too much bacon or too much butter, unfortunately, we have some bad side effects. Some things like atherosclerosis can happen, which all that means is it's a clogged artery. This guy on the right is clogged. This is a very large blockage. This is adipose tissue. Or pardon me, this is free floating could have broken off from some adipose tissue. This is just fat that's floating in your blood that attached to the walls of your arteries. This is called cholesterol plaques. This is what people worry about whenever they say, hey, you need to lower your cholesterol, sir or madam, because that cholesterol is going to float around in your bloodstream and it wants somewhere to attach. And its big place it wants to attach, because it's floating through your bloodstream, is on the walls of your arteries. This guy on the left over here, he's fine. His arteries are nice and pretty and clear. He has no cholesterol sticking to the sides. This guy over here probably has butter a couple of times a week. This guy over here, though, he had like 4 tablespoons of butter every meal. Every day. Or at least, way too much in the week. Please remember, don't be this guy. Be this guy. It's all about moderation. Alright, so that is the end of part 1. We'll pick up with part 2, proteins and nucleic acids. I hope it was helpful.